In this video, I'll be discussing the variable name self in Python. So the variable name self that you see over here in itself is not a keyword in Python, but it is used as a programming convention by Python programmers almost universally. If you choose to use any other names like me, ABC, or anything, and your code will still run. So what I mean by that is if you decide to use some other names like ABC or XYZ instead of self, your code will still run. But however, if you want your code to be understood by other Python programmers, then in that case, you may just want to use the name self as the first parameter in all the methods of a class because that's a universal programming convention that is accepted globally by the Python programmers. So in this example over here, um, I have a class named my class, and within this my class I have a couple of functions that I have defined. And one of the thing about the methods in Python is that any method in a Python must have a parameter, and that parameter is usually named self. Again, something that I have said at the very beginning of this video, that if you do not want to use the name self, and if you want to use some other names like ABC or XYZ, that is still fine. But please note that self is the universally accepted name for the default parameter within a Python method. So therefore, whenever a method is called, this method or any other method that's defined within your class, whenever a method is called, self will be set to the object in the call. This means that the code of a method can operate on the instance variables of any object that has been instantiated from your class. So in this example over here, the variable self, this variable self over here, refers to the same object as val. So when you do self.count, you are actually accessing the count variable instantiated by this val object. Now, some of you may wonder, as you know, why self.count and why don't we just do count equals to 0? Something like, why do we not do count equals to 0, right? Now, the whole idea of doing self.count equals to 0 is that self is actually an object that represents the val object. Okay, so let me actually show this to you. So if I choose to rename, let's say, self with val in this case, and just replace everything over here. So now, as you can see, I do not instead of naming the variable as self, I name the variable as val. Okay, so if I run this code, my code is still going to run fine. So let me open up my console command prompt and show you what I mean by that. So this is okay, let me save my code here. So I'm going to run this code, and please note that at this point I do not really have self as a parameter name, but instead I chose to use the val. And also something that I said somewhere in the middle of this video is that when you write self as a parameter, that self is actually representing the val object that has been instantiated from the my class, this one over here. So let me run this code. So you see the code still runs. Now if I do Control Z and have everything back to how it was, that is self as the first parameter within the function. Now let me run my code again, and this code will still run. Okay, so the main point here that you need to understand is that self in itself is not a keyword in Python, but it's a default parameter accepted by, it's a name of the default parameter name of the default parameter accepted by the Python programmers universally. So if you want to have your program be readable globally by almost all the Python programmers, and in that case, you may just want to have the first parameter name as self instead of any other random names like in ABC or XYZ. And another thing is that why are we doing self.count and not just count equals to 0? The answer to that is the count is an instance of the val object, or maybe the better way to put this is that count is actually an instance variable or an instance of this self object, which actually represents the val object, which is an object of this my class variable. So to denote count or any other variable as an instance of this val object, we would do val.count equals to 0, .count equals to 0, or self.count equals to 0. So hopefully this video was helpful. If not, you can always let me know in the comments below.